Okay, at this time, we'll bring the January 12th, 2026 City Council work meeting to open. I guess we're going to jump to number 2 first, garbage haulers, being they're here.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, we had a kind of a request come forward about garbage hauling and what other communities are doing, and wanted to kind of start this discussion a little bit. I know that there was some presentation of what Ham Lake has done. I know I've sent you now Ham Lake's contract, and then it came to mind that, well, I've got friends with ACE, and I thought, let's have them come in here and kind of give us their perspective on this discussion and how it impacts cities and some of the laws that surround it and that sort of thing. And then as that generates questions, we can gain a better understanding of what route we want to take on this. But we've got with us Mr. Dave Wiggins, who works for ACE and been a good friend for many years. We also have Chris De La Forest, former state rep, who lobbies for ACE and other haulers and is heavily involved in this discussion right now. Anoka, City of Anoka is on their second round, I think, of this discussion. They took it to the voters. It was voted down, and they're bringing it back. And so these two gentlemen are knee deep in that discussion right now, and I think they can offer us some valuable insight into the pros and cons of what cities get into when they want to talk about these different projects. But anyways, I'd invite them to the podium if they'd like, or one at a time, which however they want to do it, and go from there, if that's all right, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Easier if we both come up and we can.
Both these work? Oops, sorry. I have one, I got one.
Matt, would you like us to
Yeah.
kick off? Offer some experience. Mayor, members of the council, again, I'm Chris De La Forest with ACE Solid Waste. I've been involved with organized collection and these issues in the statute, chapter 115A.94, for many, many years. And my purpose here tonight isn't to come in and tell you that changing your garbage system is some sort of inherent evil. You know, ACE works in both types of systems, but I do have some perspectives on how it might get done, how it works best, if it's done at all, and some of the challenges and other issues that you might face in wading into this. And I would say, first of all, at the outset, as I mentioned, there is a statute, a law that governs all of this, and it's very complex. And so you're going to need to follow that, of course. There's a step-by-step process to negotiating a change to the waste hauling system with the existing haulers, et cetera. So you're going to have your city attorney or some other counsel heavily involved, I would advise, to guide you through the process. And that's the second point I would make, is that it's a very involved process. You may think it's pretty easy because most of us get great garbage service. You move the cart out to the end of the driveway once a week and garbage truck comes by and picks it up. But now you're talking about all those thousands of household contracts that you have that are individual with haulers now getting swept up into one city contract. And that's going to take, under the best of circumstances, a long time, a lot of staff hours, and some money to do, because you're talking about a complex legal document. Staff is going to negotiate with haulers, and you've got to negotiate all the many hundreds or thousands of details that you take for granted about when you as an individual citizen negotiate your garbage contract, or more or less just sign up. You don't negotiate it with your hauler. And then you're going to, of course, have lawyers take a look at it and bless it. And on average, it's about 25 to 35, maybe even 40 pages of dense legal contract. So at the outset, you're going to have those kind of complexities even under the best of circumstances. A second point I would make is that the cities where I've seen this process go well, no matter how it turns out, a lot of times cities look at this and decide it's not what they want to do. Take your time, be very inclusive. Talk to the haulers that you have. We're always available. Cities that I've seen do it well, sometimes they survey their residents. They'll commission a survey and ask some questions about whether or not they want to do this. Other times they'll have town hall meetings and invite people in to talk about the issue and get the citizens involved, because no matter how you decide to do this, if you decide to move forward, it's going to be controversial. It really is. You might think that Garbage hauling isn't all that controversial, but people tend to get really emotional about it, especially the idea that a lot of people will say, look, I want to choose my hauler. I can negotiate that. I can pick the price. And the best thing about that system, they would say, is that if I don't get good service, if I don't get a good price, well, then I am in the driver's seat to choose to hire another hauler if I wish. Whereas if you move to the other system, of course, you're picking the hauler for the person, and so they might get emotional because they like the hauler they have. Now the city has picked a hauler for them, and it might be a different one. And if there's bad service, if the can doesn't get picked up, well, they're gonna call you. Well, they're gonna call Matt. And so people tend to get a little bit upset about that. And that raises another issue for me. I have never seen a city that has moved to this type of system not have to hire additional FTE to deal with it. I've never seen that. Even the cities that enthusiastically embrace it and say it works super great, we love it. Richfield is an example. Even the folks in Richfield have said we had to hire extra FTE to deal with all these issues that we take care of right now in our customer service center. And I would pause there, maybe if anyone has a question or if David would like to say something.
And in Richfield specifically, that was in addition to the fact that the haulers do all the billing. City, on the surface, you would think, don't do anything, because we were in Mounds View a year and a half ago, and they had invited the gal from Richfield to come and talk. And they said, oh, how much time do you spend? Because we're not planning on adding any help or anything like that. So I spend 40 hours a week with hauling issues. And then their next question, well, yeah, but you do the billing and customer service. No, I don't do any of that. The haulers do all that. And so there's always more to it than meets the eye from a staff standpoint. One thing I've heard two things, and I read one thing up here on the thing where you use the word RFP, and we mentioned Ham Lake. I'm actually ACE's person that negotiates with Ham Lake, and we actually have that contract is sitting with their legal review right now for renewal. And obviously I wasn't here back in 1990 when that consortium was created, but looking at the file, back then there was 3 or 4 or more haulers in Ham Lake whenever, in that time frame, I think it's about when the state passed the burning ban. So cities had to figure out, we got to have garbage service in our city one way or another. And cities are tasked with assuring that that's happening, whether it be through the current system you have or some other means. Well, Ham Lake at that point decided we want to have an organized system, and so they got with all of the haulers, and that group of haulers created a consortium, actually a company called the Ham Lake Haulers. And so then that group, essentially the portion of that company, Ham Lake Haulers, that each one of them owned was their percentage of the city that they picked up. And so the city got divided up in zones, and one neighborhood got this hauler, that, another one got that. So the city assigned a hauler, like Chris is pointing out. Through time, some of those haulers retired, passed away, and different things, and their families sold their businesses either to ACE or Waste Management. And today, there's just 2 haulers, us and them, and we split the city. So I know a lot of people think that was just a bid that the 2 companies went together and done at some point, but that's not the case. It comes from creating that consortium, which is part of that 115A statute that Chris is talking about. But there's a lot goes into all this, and he and I have, fortunately or unfortunately, worked together on this for the last almost 12 years, so we can potentially answer a lot of questions. Like Chris said, becomes a controversial and passionate issue for people. I shared a picture with Matt of the city council meeting at Anoka the other night, and it had an overflow crowd into the next room. Pretty vocal group, so we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to touch on this as well. I know that, I think there were some numbers shared as to what Ham Lake was paying. I think it's $17 range or something like that a can. And people are kind of then thinking, well, I pay X amount more, or whatever the case is. I checked with their finance human resource director and their city administrator. Every city gets what's called SCORE money from the county. We utilize our SCORE dollars in our recycling facility here. I think almost exclusively there. And in Ham Lake, they take their SCORE dollars and they use it to subsidize the recycling cost for the residents on the pickup. So the haulers that would normally charge that as part of their monthly pickup, they're being paid by the SCORE dollars in lieu of the residents, picking up that tab. And then if Ham Lake has a recycling center, I'm assuming they do, that would have to come out of their budget or general levy to offset those costs. So it's, sometimes when we hear about how come they're getting it for less or whatever the case is, sometimes it's kind of like a shell game of dollars. It's like, what's the color of money? Because as was explained to me, the cost is the cost is the cost. What the resident pays is somewhat unrelated because it could be subsidized by the city, and as is the case in Ham Lake. But I think I paid $25 or something like that in Ramsey, and I get both services. And so if you deduct $7 off that, it's probably similar to what Ham Lake would be paying if they weren't being subsidized with the SCORE dollars. So you can use your SCORE dollars for that, but again, I think we run a pretty successful recycling center drop off. You got to pay for the people to come and pick up, I don't know, whatever electronics that get dropped off, or recycle the oil, or pick up plastics and things like that. And there's a cost to that. I know we give some of those dollars to the Boy Scouts. I think they come through and do a lot of that work as well. So might be Lions groups, one of the two. But at any rate, wanted to mention that. And so it's not always what you're paying. It's kind of behind the scenes, some of the dollars that are being subsidized on that. So,
Matt, that's right. There are a couple of things to bear in mind. I would start with just the simple human observation. We all know that there's no such thing as a free lunch. The competitive marketplace does a pretty good job when haulers or gas stations or grocery stores are competing against one another for people's business. And I know it gets tempting to look at some other cities and say, well, wait a minute, look at the price that they get. But as Matt noted, there are a lot of factors that go into it. The price that you see at the headline maybe not be the real price, and especially when these cities, have the organized collection system under the statute. For example, what I find in general, a couple things to bear in mind is, one, a lot of the costs that haulers bear 100% of get taken on by the city and sort of get spent out of the general fund. And so there might be a headline garbage price that looks like X, but it's still pretty much probably Y, because there are a lot of functions that are paid for out of the general fund that citizens just don't see. So the headline looks really attractive. Another way in which organized collection cities and the haulers who service them, in a way the price gets bought down, for example, is they make everybody have service. Right now I'm sure East Bethel is like a lot of cities where you have citizens who don't pay for garbage service, and that's okay because they're sharing a can with their neighbor, for example, or they're senior citizens and their daughter comes by every Sunday to have dinner, and then she takes the garbage with her on the way out and puts it in her can. Or you've got folks who have the ability to just throw their trash in the dumpster at work. They may have a rental property they own and they throw the garbage in there. They're not going to pay for garbage service twice. So there are a lot of things that go in there. Even I had a mayor ask me, and I don't want to use a lot of names if it's negative. He said, well, why can't I have the price that my daughter has up in Elk River? Well, the Elk River landfill is a stone's throw from her house. The transportation costs are really low. And this mayor was in the sort of the near North Metro, about 25 miles away from the landfill. Well, we've got transportation costs. So it can be tempting to look at those headlines and look at a price and say, well, why can't we get that? Well, there's a lot that goes into it, and you have to dig in and have your staff understand, well, is that really the price that people are paying?
In many cases, cities that have had a system in place for a long time frankly, if you call and ask them, how much time do you spend? You know, they've just kind of just become part of their jobs, and there may be half a dozen people in some of those offices that answer questions and do things that are just kind of built into their tasks that get paid for out of their general fund, but they don't really realize that's a cost that if they didn't have that system, they wouldn't be incurring. So it becomes hard to say, here's the exact cost that city incurs out of here, this bucket or that bucket, because quite frankly, they don't even know. I don't know either completely, but we know there's a little bit of that's, call it undefinable, so to speak. And like I say, this becomes a very passionate issue when it comes up.
I got a question is, what kind of weight are those garbage trucks?
Our trucks typically, if they're, this came up in Anoka last time around, and I went and checked the weights of our trucks that dump at our transfer station, and our side loaders that are dumping are around 60,000 pounds. They all have, we run, on the rears, we run what's called 315 tires, so they're as wide as we can put with duals. And we run 3 axles in the back on all of our garbage trucks. And our recycle trucks, they tend to be a whole lot lighter just because you can imagine they're hauling plastic bottles and that sort of stuff. So a lot of them only have 2 axles on the back. Okay. But then in the front, we run the 425s or 485s, so they're as wide as you can stuff under it. And out through all this in Anoka, I actually did a study. I met with our tire vendor. He and I measured a bunch of tires and so forth, and I can't remember the exact pounds per square inch, but a fully loaded garbage truck puts less weight on the road on a per square inch basis than a school bus.
That was
So a school bus runs a little narrow tire, and that, you know, I used, I think it was 75 pounds per kid. You know, if you loaded it up with a football team, obviously way more, but if it's full of kindergartners, it'd be less.
Right.
So
that was my next question, because I was thinking, on my street alone, I mean, a school bus goes by, I think there's a couple of them, so it's 4 times at least a day.
there's 3 different routes runs on my street over in Oak Grove, and it's like, and I'm in St. Francis district.
Yeah, because I think that's kind of one of the reasons this brought up by a resident, because his road was being destroyed. But that's what I was trying to figure out too, garbage truck versus school buses. School buses are good size too. And they're going there a lot more than sometimes garbage trucks.
One that has drawn my attention, and I don't know what it weighs, so is these new Amazon battery powered vans. Those things, they got 4 tires that are this wide. They got to have a huge battery because they're running way out here. I don't know what those things weigh to our roads, and just the other day on my street, there's 2 of them at the same time, and it's like, can't you, can't you guys just do what you can? They only come once, but and everybody sees it, but that one's one that's got my eye. I'm a load guy, and so that one's got to be one of the heaviest vehicles on the road as far as what we're
I agree,
pressuring
all
on
the
the
batteries
road.
and stuff like that in there.
And
Thank you.
yeah, and I would also add what's interesting if you change the garbage system, and some people say, well, a benefit of this is we would have fewer trucks on the road. You still have the same amount of garbage to get hauled out of East Bethel every week. So those trucks are actually going to be heavier. So a lot of times our trucks coming through East Bethel, they've got a part of East Bethel, they'll move to Ham Lake, they'll move to some other city, right, and pick up. Whereas if you have trucks that are dedicated to picking up East Bethel, they're likely going to be a heck of a lot heavier on your roads. But even having said that, we've researched this issue. We've even commissioned an independent study on this issue, and it's not real surprising that the engineers have concluded that, really the culprit in beating up our roads is the thing we can't control, and that's Mother Nature. That our harsh climate, the freeze-thaw cycle, that's really the enemy of our roads here, and unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot we can do about it. And I certainly understand, your road budget, like any other city. I mean, it's an expense for you, and you have an obligation to look out for it. But I just, in all my years of experience, I've looked at this issue more than I've ever wanted to. And I have never seen a city transition to a new system. And then I've looked at their road budgets after, they haven't really saved any money. The road expenses have all gone up, and there's no way you can discern it, because that's one of the things some city councils will say, right? Is, hey, we're gonna save on the roads. But then the road budgets don't change, but then the citizens also ask that question, like, well, how much? And how much of a property tax benefit am I gonna see? And it always ends up not turning out that way. You know, St. Paul's another example. St. Paul's garbage bills and their road budget have never been higher. And they went from like a consortium system down to a monopoly with one hauler. And it's sort of like they exchange no financial benefit for customer service complaints. I mean, there's been news articles about how bad St. Paul is. So I've just never seen a road savings in 23 years.
It's true.
So I got two questions, if you have the information to answer them. First, with the cities that have developed a one or two garbage supplier that they went down this route and not considering supplementing it with any city funds, do they actually see cost savings in their monthly bill for that service? And the second one would be, you mentioned having put together a big 40-page contract and the city taking on more responsibility. If, in your experience, would you be able to put on how much that actually costs the city to put a program together?
Well, what we've seen on the first question was some people will pay less, some will pay more, some will pay about the same. And historically, that's because, you know, there's, here in your city, you've got 4 haulers. I think you got, your website says you have 5, but you actually have 4. SRC was sold to Waste Management about a year and a half ago. So they still have 2 licenses, but it's one company. And then, you know, your area is picked up out of Cambridge, is where they're picked up out of the Waste Management yard there. As to the second one, we know that the city of Anoka said that the piece that they would do they would add, and they're guessing at now, they're gonna add $2 per home to the rate themselves for their piece of it. But every city's gonna have a different number, and believe me, I've never worked for government and I don't understand how all that works, but that's what they said.
So really on the first question, it's kind of a horse apiece that you might see cost savings, but you might not. And the second part, I mean, what would it cost, 10,000, 50,000 to put a program together and expenses towards it? You know, do you know of a ballpark that it takes?
Yeah, so I understand your question, council member. Is that, you're talking about that initial cost? Like, what would it cost to just go through this process?
Yeah, the initial cost.
Sure.
And after the initial cost, are there now new ongoing costs?
As to the initial costs, there will definitely be initial costs, and there might be costs you track or not. Like your folks on city staff who do all this work, they're obviously gonna put a lot of hours into this, and you can probably track that in some way where you're not actually writing an extra check, of course. You already budget for salary and benefits and things like that. But a lot of times, you know, this gets so complex, cities need to bring in outside legal counsel and pay them how much ever they charge an hour. Like, I know that on legal fees alone, the last time we went through this with Anoka, the city said it was about $40,000 in legal fees. Councilmember Weaver will tell you that other expenses he thinks put it up over $100,000 to go through the process. And so we certainly see that if cities go through this, a couple of things, if they decide to even start the process, the cities that do it right have engaged their citizens to find out if there's an appetite to do this in the first place. But then they go through that process of making it a priority for the city and therefore a budget. You know, for cities, there are some cities that sort of jump into it pell-mell, and that really starts to cause a lot of problems. And frankly, it is in Anoka right now because it wasn't identified as a city priority, and there's no city budget for it. And so, again, Councilmember Weaver is one who said, what are we doing? We know this is gonna cost us money. It did the last time around, and there's no budget for it. And then to answer your second question, Councilmember, it really depends upon how much the city wants to own in those ongoing costs. Some cities take a very involved approach. They even own the garbage cans. They buy the garbage cans, they service them, they do the billing. But at some level, if East Bethel were to change its waste hauling system, your staff would be taking on some level of more responsibility. Because obviously you wouldn't change the system if you weren't gonna have the city take more on and control more. You just leave the current system in place.
Okay.
One thing too, back to your first comment on price, honestly, you know, you have 4 haulers and residents that, you know, like Chris said a little bit ago, you know, if you don't like what you're getting from one hauler, pick up the phone and call another and be a smart shopper, quite frankly. We encourage that, and that's how you end up, as a consumer, get what you. There was one of the council members in Anoka the other night was talking about what she paid, and I have no idea what haulers she has or anything like that, but she said, you know, if anybody, you know, I think I'm getting a great rate, and you know, and here's what I think our rate ought to be. And then 2 people in the audience, well, I'm getting a better rate than that already. And then she's like, well, we need to talk. I don't know if they talked or not, but you know, that's in the public forum the other night. That honestly, that's people that if they don't like what they're getting from me or whoever, that's the beauty of the system you have in place now. They can fire me today. I was quoted in the Star Tribune Sunday, if at Ace, we want to earn people's business at the end of every week by doing a good job. And in a government system, somebody, you guys tell me what neighborhood I'm going to pick up in. And so then those consumers, if they don't like me, they can't get rid of me. They're stuck with me because you said so.
That's right. I would also, if I could, just one other thing too, is I think sometimes the debate becomes all about price, and that's not what goes into picking a waste hauler or any other service, right? For people shop on things besides price. You know, they may like their hauler, they may have long experience with their hauler, they may want to go with the local business. We have plenty of residents who go with Ace or some other hauler because they like the driver. I mean, they know the driver. I use the example, I'm a veteran, and so I get my insurance through USAA. I could probably get a cheaper rate somewhere else, but I don't care because I want to do business with a veteran service organization. So I might pay a little bit more. I don't even call and ask because I don't care. So if government proposed to come to me and say, we're going to pick your insurance company for you, and it's probably not going to be USAA, I'd get pretty peeved about that because price isn't paramount for me, right? I don't want to get ripped off, of course, but the price I pay, I look at my bill, you know, quarterly or for my car insurance, and I say, yeah, it works for me. Might not work for my neighbor, but that's the beauty of the system. It doesn't matter. If it works for me and it works for USAA, we're good.
So, for reasoning, we're kind of looking into this because we have 4 or 5 haulers and the damage, potential damage to the road, etc. And you explained how it came to be in Ham Lake. When cities typically go into a limited hauler contract bidding system, etc., what is their reasoning for wanting to do that? Is it similar to ours, or is there other unique circumstances that actually make them go into a 1 or 2 hauler system?
There are generally about 3 reasons why cities say they want to look at the issue or actually change, and one is one we've already discussed. There's a belief that there will be a savings on the road budget. Another argument is that we've got too many garbage trucks, they're big, they're dangerous. We usually pull then the traffic records, accident reports, make a Data Practices Act request, you know, traffic citations, and we always find out that accidents involving garbage trucks or speeding tickets or moving violations are exceptionally rare. and I hate to say this, but the other thing we find out that we don't really publicize is that city vehicles are involved in a lot more incidents than what our garbage trucks are. In another city I won't mention, we found a report that one of their employees got out of a brand new utility vehicle and didn't set the parking brake on a hill, and what happened to that. The third argument that we see is the belief that government can negotiate a better price than the citizens can, that will negotiate a better price, and that's better than what citizens can get on their own. So those are really the three arguments. And if I could, I'd throw something else in there. I mean, certainly we've talked to cities who have said, look, we don't think us taking on garbage hauling is good for us. By the same token, we think perhaps maybe we have too many trucks, or there are things we can do with the system. And I would just throw out there a couple of things that we have done in the past is, of course, we say very diplomatically, well, you license all the haulers. I mean, we don't. I mean, you have one city, a moderate-sized suburb, had 10 licensed haulers. I was like, you're way out of market. I don't know if you need 10 haulers. So we've encouraged them, first of all, take a look at your licensing fees. Take a look at some of the requirements you have for insurance and things like that. You might find out, I don't know, Matt, that it's your case here, but a lot of cities will say, geez, we haven't looked at our licensing requirements in 20 years. And so, that's one way you can have higher standards and ensure that the haulers that are coming into your city are professionals. They've got the requisite insurance, and they can pay more than a $50 licensing fee. We welcome those kind of things because we find that the corner cutters in our industry are the ones that cause most of the problems and cause city councils to call us and say, look, we're kind of ticked off. Another thing that we have done in the past is, cities have limited the number of licenses they offer in a city. They may say, hey, a city of our size, we've done some research and it looks like about maybe 5, I'll throw that out there as an example, is the right number. And so we're going to limit the number of licenses at that. So my point, council member, is that there's certainly a lot of steps in between. On the one hand, having the current system, or going all the way to saying we're going to take over the garbage system.
We found one city that was actually down in the city, in immediate suburbs out of Minneapolis. Their insurance requirements for a garbage truck was less than I had on my car. I was like, I was shocked. I said, you need to add some zeros to that number. And so there's a number of things like that. There's some of those cities that also put, and that was also one of them, that put a limit on licenses. And the way they did it is, like they said, we're going to get down to 3 or 4 haulers before we will issue another license. So, just like in your city, you got 5 right now, but in reality, you got 4 because one was just bought out. And over time, garbage businesses, just like in Ham Lake, they had several. And to tell you the truth, I couldn't tell in the documents how many they had, but they had 4 or 5 back when they started. And now they got 2. So over time, that number goes down as long as you guys don't say, oh yeah, we're going to give you another license. And Fred showed up with a pickup truck, we'll give him one. And that's how this thing snowballs into your concerns.
That's something we might want to look at, then review.
Remind the folks again of the website that they can go to, the KISS Solution runs.
Oh,
Yeah, haulersforchoice.com really has some good information on there that you can access if you wish to learn more about the issue. But certainly, council members said there's a lot of steps that can be taken in between to try and address concerns and avoid the expense and the complexities and the hassle, and frankly, the long-term ownership of this issue. Another thing, and Dave, I don't know if East Bethel has it here, but day zone collection is another thing that we've done in the past.
I don't think you do.
So for example, you could get, folks call up and rightfully say, hey, I'm a little bit irritated that on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I've got garbage pickup on my street. And we've worked with cities to have day zone collection, for example, to say, in this quadrant of the city, Monday's the pickup day, in this quadrant it's Tuesday, Wednesday here, and Thursday here. So at least citizens can know, in my neighborhood, Monday is the pickup day. No matter who we have for a hauler, the trucks will come in on Monday and take the garbage out, and then the other 6 days a week, we're not gonna have garbage trucks.
And one of the ways to accomplish that, and whatever a lot of the issues you may, as you think about it, as you realize you have, have a meeting, have staff have a meeting with the haulers, have them come in and talk about those issues. And as a group, the hauling communities really can work together with you to help solve many of your questions and concerns. If you got some specific roads that are, maybe they're gravel roads, and especially in the spring, whenever weight's an issue, to have a specific roads that you have a concern about, work with those haulers to say, we want you to pick those roads up first, early in your route, not last in your route, so they'll be the lightest you can be. And, I know most of the haulers you have that pick up in your city, either the owners or their managers or whatever, and virtually all of them are reasonable people. I'm more than happy to work through issues that can solve a lot of them, and nobody's got it. You won't have a line of people complaining about, because all they'll see is a benefit versus any of the controversial stuff that you can run into with this.
And I think that's a big concern of our residents as we put in these new roads in specific areas. These aren't straight roads, these are curved roads.
I've
These are
driven on
roads
some
that
of
are
them.
a little-
I live on the other side of 65 in Oak Grove, so
Right.
I'm nearby.
And that's the concern, we want to keep them new. That's the goal here, along with road maintenance and so forth. Is there anything else you can suggest other than that morning pickup, which makes a lot of sense, that would help keep these roads looking better, looking new? So we don't have to
One
replace them?
benefit you have versus cities that are closer to Elk River, to the dump, you're the kind of, for most of these routes, you're the farthest away from the dump. And so if they're gonna go from your city to another city, odds are they're starting here first already. So geographically, you get some benefit. You're along, the nearest either transfer stations or landfills. Our transfer stations in Ramsey, the landfills in Elk River. There's transfer stations in Blaine, and that's it. So you're not right next door to where it's beneficial for the truck to, end its route here fully loaded. So you get some benefit geographically that, Ramsey doesn't get, because they're right on top of our transfer station, for example.
Well, I know we talked about the roads a lot and everything, and it's kind of twofold. I think part of this was to see if we could get some rates down to, I know like in my area, I have all the haulers, 5 days a week. And the rates are unreal between you all.
So I
There's
say,
quite a difference.
pick up the phone.
I know, that's my problem. But, I mean, I can't believe the rates are that far apart on some of them.
I have no idea what different people's rates are, but
Well, I've been with you guys forever, and you're at the high point.
yeah. Well, I would encourage you to call our office then.
Yeah, do it for me too.
Yep, certainly, that's absolutely right. It goes back kind of my point where your neighbor might be okay paying that price that they're paying, right? When I check into a hotel, the person next to me may be paying a lot less than I did, but I made the reservation and it worked for me. But I can't emphasize that enough, that we really, really encourage customers to be smart shoppers. If you don't think that you're getting the right price or the right service, please call us.
And no matter whether it's us or whoever your hauler is, call them. Typically, there's things you can do to work through it.
Yep. Call and demand it. And of course, you've, again, under this system, got that choice. If you feel like you're not getting that cost and that service level, you're free to hire one and fire the next. That was a point that was made by a lot of the residents in Anoka when they finally demanded to be heard at the city council meeting. And they said, hey, look, once we go to this system, there's no going back. May look like at a great rate today. What are the rates going to look like in St. Paul 5 years from now? What do we do? Because it's really, really hard to transition back. It's not like a light switch. Even if the city council came back and said, man, we made a mistake, it is really, really hard to sort of unwind that. I mean, you really are committing to, I wouldn't say permanent, but really a long-term change in everything that comes with it.
Well, one thing a point that got brought up in Anoka the other night was, you know, today you're saying your admin fee is gonna be $2 a month. But what happened, and you raised our tax levy, it was, I don't remember, 9-point-something%, so call it close to 10. What's to keep some future council from saying, you know, we don't wanna raise taxes by 9% this year, we wanna keep it flat, but we're gonna raise the garbage admin bill to $20. Or, you know, it becomes it's never gonna, I've never seen it change back once it goes to a organized system. And what would future councils, how would they handle that? I don't know. But at the end of the day, you're the ones gonna have your name on it. And so just make sure you work through this. We're here more than happy to answer questions. Matt has both our cell phones, and we're more than happy to answer any questions. If you know, I go to bed about 9 o'clock and I'm up by 5:30 or 6. So anytime in between those two, you can call me.
Yeah, we're happy to participate in any kind of meeting at any time. Absolutely.
But if you just got a question, call me. So this is what I do.
I have a quick question. So a lot of the garbage companies I know have like fines if they put the wrong thing in the wrong bin or something like that. How does that work on a monopoly situation like this?
That'll all go into that contract as to how that's handled. Typically, right, in most cases, at least from what I'm familiar with, is with recycling.
Right.
If people put contaminants in the recycling, you know, plastic bags in the recycling is the absolute worst thing you or any of your neighbors can do. So if you see your neighbor bagging their recycling, and I got a couple I've had to tell a dozen times and they still don't get it, either, you know, that load's gonna get fined when we take it to dump, and that's that fine from the processing plant being passed on. And at some point, if there's enough bags in there, that load will have to go to the landfill because the recycling center will reject the load. So then there's really a big cost to it. So that's the reason for that.
I understand the reason.
It's recycling, and that'd be something that it become consistent because it'd be whatever the agreement said. But then there won't be any, oh, this hauler does that or that does that. They'll all do the same thing, and there'll be something in there.
And it has to get negotiated. Again, that's one of those reasons why the lawyers get involved, is suddenly it's, well, what is the system gonna look like? And are there appeal rights? And are there warnings? And pretty soon you've got pages and pages of documentation in the contract about how this is gonna be handled. And that is really, you know, a lesson for everything you take for granted now. Suddenly everything has to be spelled out, and there has to be a process listed in the contract about how things happen. And it gets, in my view, unduly formalistic. And, you know, look, when you invite lawyers to get involved in stuff, it tends to get that way. But really stuff that you and I would look at and say, that's common sense, or it just gets handled with the hauler and the resident. If the resident doesn't like it, they're gonna get rid of the hauler. Well, now it's all spelled out in the contract, and everybody rushes to the contract anytime there's a problem. All the way, I mean, there are lots of issues I could talk about, and I won't take any more time, but what happens when it snows, right? What happens if somebody's can doesn't get picked up within 6 hours or a day? And that's why you get a 38-page contract.
So it's kind of sounding like we should look at making small changes rather than making a large change and leaping into this.
That'd be our recommendation. So.
Yeah.
And we're happy to help all that, and I'm sure the other haulers would be as well. Like I say, if you all just take your time and create a list of the things that you are concerned about, and with the exception of price, because that group of haulers can't sit in the room with Matt and negotiate a deal, because we can all go to jail for that. But other than that, you know, the road issues or pickup, whatever, think about that list, and we can sit down and work through that and potentially create, in a simple manner, create a whole lot of eliminate a whole lot of grief for folks.
I'd say it's just like medical care, you know, you wanna start with as little as possible and have the lightest touch as possible. If you go and say, hey, I got a problem with my finger, the first thing is, say, why don't we cut it off and see if that doesn't help? Well, no, we're gonna try something else, right? And I think that's how I see it. I mean, that city taking over the garbage hauling contract, that's sort of the nuclear option, if you will, of dealing with garbage issues. And, you know, that's been our point, is that there are a lot of options in between on that spectrum of sort of city involvement in the process. And we've just found that the lightest touch works for everybody. The city doesn't really want to own these issues if they can help it. And we've got experience, generations of experience dealing with those things. And again, with the system, I'll say it one last time, it's customer centered. The customer's at the center of this. They get to pick. They pick their service level, they get to negotiate their price, and they've got the ultimate control of picking another hauler if they don't like what they're getting.
Yeah, we don't want much. We want the best service, the best prices, make sure our roads are good.
You don't want much, you
no
want it all.
maintenance.
I get it, yeah, like we all
We
do.
appreciate the information you brought into
You
that.
bet.
It was
No,
very
we
helpful,
appreciate your
very
time.
helpful.
We really do.
Yeah.
Appreciate you listening to us here tonight.
Yep, thank you.
As I said, he's got our number, so.
Okay,
Thanks
you,
for
guys.
coming in.
thanks.
So moving forward, I think we really need a little more information.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, we can schedule another work session or talk
Okay.
through this.
Yep.
Yep, let's get a little more information and
All right.
move on to the first one there, tax burden video.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, we had both of these were kind of discussions brought on by individuals coming to the podium and kind of raising issues. And it's good to have these discussions because there's sometimes understandings of the way things are and lack of understandings of why they are the way they are. But at any rate, I wanted to, again, this is maybe the first part of a longer conversation, but I wanted to kind of start off with a video that Anoka County had put together with regards to property taxes and kind of helping people understand how property taxes work in Anoka County particularly, but in the state of Minnesota as well. So I will start this, and I think it's 4 minutes, so we should have plenty of time. Have some questions afterwards.
As long as governments have existed, going back thousands of years, so have taxes. By definition, a tax is a charge or levy, money in this day and age, collected by the government from people or businesses for public use. Examples include the income tax, sales tax, and property tax. The money is used to pay for police protection, roads and bridges, human services, and more. In Minnesota, the property tax is collected on property owned by a person or business. Decisions made by government have a big impact on your property taxes, whether it be a decision made at the local, state, or federal level. The term local government refers to your city, county, school district, and any other entities that have been given taxing authority by law. If you take a look at your property tax notification or statement, you'll see that it lists a whole host of taxing authorities. The county sends these notices on behalf of those taxing authorities, including your city, school district, the state, and several others depending on where you live and the type of property you own. Every year, each of those taxing authorities sets a budget for the upcoming year, and they determine how much property tax levy will be necessary to support that budget. A change in any of those city, county, or school district budgets and levies could impact your property taxes. To make it really simple, think of the property tax levy as a pie. Once the levy amount or size of the pie is established, it's time to determine how to divide it. The number of slices represents the number of properties contributing to the pie. The size of each slice is determined by value. Bigger slices represent higher valued properties, and vice versa. How can the size of your slice become smaller? First, your government can lower the levy amount collected from property owners, meaning the overall size of the pie gets smaller. Second, more properties could be built in the community, which helps ease the share for everyone. No doubt you've heard the phrase, many hands make light work. And third, the amount of money local governments receive from state and federal sources could increase, leaving the local government less dependent on the tax levy. But what about your property value? Where does that fit in? Your property value probably fluctuated a lot during the recent recession. Your property taxes can be affected by your property's value. The market value of your property is the likely selling price in the current market. That value is evaluated or assessed at least every 5 years by an assessor hired by your county or city. The assessor will determine if the property is valued similarly to comparable properties in the area. Your property taxes are also affected by the value of other properties, whether it's a home or business, existing or new. A significant increase or decrease in another property's value can affect your property's value. As we said earlier, new construction can help lower property taxes by growing the tax base and thus diluting the tax responsibility. So the amount of property taxes you pay can be influenced by both your property's value and the value of properties around you. Overall, the amount you pay in property taxes boils down to two things: a property's value, whether it's yours or someone else's, or a decision made by your local, state, or federal government. Collectively, the money supports law enforcement, the roads we travel, where we learn, where we laugh, and where we live.
Okay, so a lot of this you're probably already aware of, but we had a gentleman come in and kind of bringing up how do we, was mentioned in there, kind of the easing of the share or easing of the burden of taxes. And they said, why don't we have more businesses to kind of take that burden off of the residents? And that is true. More businesses would do that, more residents would do that as well. As they indicated, kind of diluting that burden or reducing the size of your budget. And so I think the thing that kind of went unsaid during that public comment period was we're not chasing businesses out. Matter of fact, we're encouraging them to come in that corridor along 65. And so as they come in, we've kind of talked a little bit about Highway 65 and some of the dollars that are being invested in the Blaine area there and kind of some of the development that'll probably be coming as a result of that. All that development will essentially help to write down the burden as it is today. Now tomorrow, as kind of indicated, the future councils might say, no, we want a 20% increase in our levy to fund whatever. And that's going to have an impact then on everybody. And I think it's just, it's a great conversation to have. You want to, the cost of government, I've always said, is probably around, I would say, 6% annually. What does 6% cover? Well, your insurances go up, your cost of fuel goes up. Plow truck today is, Nate might be able to correct me, but probably around $400,000 or more. The fire trucks are, $1 million to $2 million, depending on if you get a ladder truck. Costs keep going up, and if you try and put a percentage on that, I would say it's ballpark in the 6%. Well, this council last year raised the levy by 3.7%. So if you look at that and you had a 6% increase, you've actually reduced, what would have been a break even in terms of the cost of government. So that's kudos to you for your work in terms of keeping control of the expenditures. Department heads have done a great job of doing that as well. And that's in effect reducing the size of that pie, because the pie should have been 6% larger. It was only 3.7% larger as of last year. So this is the kind of discussion I wanted to kind of have. There are communities out there that get a lot more involved in TIF, tax increment financing. They try and get more businesses in by giving them land or by writing down their development costs. It's not something the city has done a terrible amount of. We have some TIF currently right now. The apartment complex and others have been TIF'd, I think we have 3 TIFs that are running right now. Generally, they're a 25-year TIF. But there are cities that have a lot more TIF because they're trying to bring in that development. Now the question is do the taxes they pay offset the benefit that you're giving them? And that's the equation that has to be run if it's financially beneficial. Now you can look at jobs coming in, and instead of people driving down to Eden Prairie, they're driving to their community to work. That's a benefit. It's quality of life, certainly something you can take into account. But at any rate, it's I think a good discussion that we should have. I think the message needs to be that we are focusing on development in the corridor.